The year is 2025. Donald Trump, having secured a second term as President of the United States, reignited trade tensions with China. The world watched as the two economic giants locked horns once more, threatening to destabilize the global order. This essay will delve into the escalating US-China tensions in 2025, examining the key events and their implications. Trump's return signaled a continuation of his America First agenda. Central to this agenda was his belief that China's economic practices were unfair. This belief set the stage for a renewed trade war. Tariffs were swiftly deployed, targeting Chinese goods. China responded with retaliatory tariffs on American products. This tit-for-tat exchange sent shockwaves through global markets. As the year progressed, the situation grew increasingly complex. Negotiations appeared shrouded in secrecy and conflicting claims. Meanwhile, China sought to strengthen ties with regional partners. This strategic move aimed to counterbalance U.S. influence. The first salvos in this renewed trade war were fired in the early days of Trump's second term. On February 1, 2025, the U.S. imposed a 10% tariff on a broad range of Chinese imports, simultaneously ending the de minimis exemption, which had previously allowed small shipments to enter the U.S. duty-free. This move, clearly aimed at increasing pressure on China, was met with swift retaliation. China responded on February 4 with tariffs on U.S. goods, and more ominously, export controls on certain products. This initial exchange set the tone for the months that followed, a period marked by escalating tariffs and increasingly acrimonious rhetoric. By April, the situation had reached fever pitch. On April 2, dubbed Liberation Day by the Trump administration, a 10% tariff on all imports, coupled with an additional 34% on Chinese goods, came into effect. This dramatic escalation saw tariffs on Chinese goods reach a staggering 145%. While some exemptions for electronics were later granted, the message was clear: the U.S. was willing to inflict significant economic pain to achieve its objectives. China, though initially adopting a more measured approach, responded in kind, matching the 125% tariff rate on certain goods. The trade war entered a new, more dangerous phase, with both sides seemingly locked in a stalemate. The global economy, already grappling with the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, braced for further turbulence. Amidst the escalating tariffs and retaliatory measures, a war of words raged between Washington and Beijing. The Trump administration, despite the increasingly hostile climate, insisted that negotiations were ongoing and that significant progress was being made. Trump himself, in his characteristically boisterous style, boasted of 200 deals being struck with China. These claims, however, were met with skepticism from the Chinese side. Beijing, while not ruling out dialogue entirely, denied the existence of any such agreements and accused the U.S. of negotiating in bad faith. This discrepancy in narratives created a climate of confusion and uncertainty, further unsettling global markets. The lack of transparency surrounding the negotiations, coupled with the often contradictory statements emanating from Washington and Beijing, made it difficult to gauge the true state of affairs. Was the trade war merely a negotiating tactic, a means to an end? Or did it represent a fundamental clash of visions, a harbinger of a new era of great power competition? The answers to these questions remained elusive. What was clear, however, was that the trade war had become deeply intertwined with domestic politics in both countries. For Trump, it played well to his base, reinforcing his image as a strongman unafraid to take on China. For Xi Jinping, it presented an opportunity to rally nationalist sentiment and burnish his credentials as a defender of Chinese interests. Section 4. Xi Jinping's Southeast Asian Gambit, Countering U.S. Influence. Xi Jinping's tour of Southeast Asia aimed to counter U.S. influence. Visiting Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia, Xi sought to strengthen ties. The trip resulted in numerous agreements and investments. Southeast Asian nations balance benefits from China with caution. The South China Sea disputes add to the complexity. Navigating U.S.-China rivalry requires a deft touch. Section 5. Global Economic Tremors, A World on Edge. The escalating trade war between the U.S. and China sent shockwaves through the global economy. Financial markets, already on edge due to geopolitical uncertainties and the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, reacted with volatility. The International Monetary Fund, in its biannual World Economic Outlook report, warned of a potential slowdown in global growth, citing the trade war as a key risk factor. The IMF's concerns were echoed by economists and business leaders worldwide. The tariffs, they argued, would disrupt global supply chains, increase costs for businesses and consumers, and dampen investment. The uncertainty surrounding the trade war, they warned, was in itself a drag on economic activity. The impact on specific sectors varied. Industries heavily reliant on trade between the US and China, such as electronics, manufacturing, and agriculture, were particularly hard hit. The tourism and education sectors, already reeling from the pandemic, faced further challenges as travel restrictions and visa issues added to the uncertainty. While the US and China, given their economic heft, were expected to bear the brunt of the trade war, its effects were felt far beyond their shores. Emerging markets, highly dependent on global trade and investment, were seen as particularly vulnerable. The trade war, by undermining global economic confidence and cooperation, threatened to exacerbate existing inequalities and push millions back into poverty. Section 6. Domestic discontent. The U.S. feels the pinch. While the Trump administration touted the benefits of its tough stance on China, the trade war's negative consequences were increasingly felt by American businesses and consumers. Prices for a wide range of goods from electronics to clothing rose as tariffs took effect. Businesses, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises, struggled to cope with increased costs and supply chain disruptions. The agricultural sector, a key target of Chinese retaliatory tariffs, was particularly hard hit. Farmers, already grappling with low commodity prices and extreme weather events, faced plummeting exports and mounting financial losses. The Trump administration's attempts to offset these losses through subsidies and aid packages provided only limited relief. Economists warned that the trade war, if prolonged, could push the U.S. economy into recession. The Federal Reserve, in a rare move, hinted at the possibility of interest rate cuts to cushion the impact of the tariffs. The trade war's impact on the U.S. economy became a political flashpoint, with Democrats accusing Trump of jeopardizing American jobs and prosperity. The trade war also had implications for healthcare costs in the U.S. The Trump administration's threat to impose tariffs on pharmaceuticals raised concerns about rising drug prices. Insulin, a life-saving medication for millions of Americans, became a focal point of this debate, as its price had already skyrocketed in recent years. The trade war, by adding further pressure to an already strained healthcare system, threatened to exacerbate existing inequalities in access to affordable care. Section 7. A future adrift? The trade war between the U.S. and China has left many wondering about the future of global economic stability. As both nations grapple with the fallout, the rest of the world watches with bated breath. The path forward is uncertain and the stakes have never been higher. How this conflict will reshape international relations and economic policies remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: the world is on the brink of significant change.